Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission launching from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. Will be providing our commentary for the duration of the coverage this afternoon. We're, of course, broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Adam Bernstein out in the field getting ready to track the rocket and do some still photography this afternoon. Michael Caine also out in the field doing some launch photography as well. If you're not already following them and you'd like to do so, here are their handles on social media. You can find Adam at aburnnyc, that's Burn with an E, and Michael Caine at MD Caine Jr. I'm also on X at W_Robinson Smith. Got the full team out for this one today. Our friends Pete Carson's with Max Key Productions and Chuck Briggs also standing by, getting ready to track the rocket against what is just pretty much a Chamber of Commerce kind of a day here in the Sunshine State. We'll have a little bit more to say about the weather in just a moment here. Taking a view from Chuck Briggs' camera, getting another angle on the Falcon 9 rocket, standing at the heart of Space Launch Complex 40 over at the Cape, otherwise known as Slick 40. Now T-minus 57 minutes, 38 seconds to the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. The mission on tap today is named the U.S. Space Force, or USSF 124 mission, sending up a batch of 6 satellites for SpaceX's 11th National Security Space Launch, or NSSL, mission to date, and its 8th using a Falcon 9 rocket. The others were using the Falcon Heavy. Liftoff set for 5:30 p.m., again 22:30 UTC. If you'd like to help support our coverage of the space program, there's a quick and easy way to do that if you haven't already. Just hit the like button on this stream. If you're not already subscribed to Spaceflight Now here on YouTube, also free to do so. Be sure to click the bell icon to turn on notifications and make sure you have all notifications turned on within YouTube. That way you get alerted whenever we start these live streams or post new video content here on the channel. We're also powered by our wonderful channel members, folks like That Opal Guy, Jeff Hansen, Callistia Lee, and many others joining us in the live chat this afternoon. Look forward to seeing more membership badges as we continue on with the stream. Membership comes with a number of perks, including access to 4K views of all of our launches from here on the Cape. We've got 2 on tap between now and early Thursday morning. Channel membership also comes with access to member-only videos here on the channel, discounts at our online shop, shop.spacelightnow.com. I mentioned we got 2 launches on tap tonight, both Falcon 9 rockets standing vertically at their pads. On the left-hand side of your screen, that is Historic Launch Complex 39A, where for the first time since 1972, a rocket with a moon-bound mission preparing to lift off, this time of the commercial variety. Intuitive Machines and SpaceX hope to take another crack at launching the Nova C lander, built by Intuitive Machines in Houston, Texas, with 6 NASA payloads as part of NASA's program to not build landers itself, but instead be a customer on commercial landers to get its science to the moon. It's called the Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLPS program. That launch had to stand down last night as they had some issues getting the liquid methane, part of the propellant combination on the lander. They were not able to get that to the correct temperature in the run-up to launch. The launch process a little bit different, or actually quite different from your standard Falcon 9 variety. As the lander uses cryogenic propellants, they do need to fuel as close to launch as possible. So the fueling of the lander begins at about T-minus 3 hours, starts with about an hour's worth of loading on the liquid methane side, then switches over to liquid oxygen, or LOX, on the lander. A little more than 1,200 kilograms of total propellant on this vehicle. Following the fueling of the IM lander, then of course it's the turn of the Falcon 9 rocket to be fueled. However, they were not able to get to the fueling process with that because they weren't able to get the methane to the correct temperature. So IM and SpaceX going to take another swing at that tonight. This launch, if all stays on track, set to lift off from Pad 39A at 1:05 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow morning. For now, all eyes are on this particular vehicle, though, this Falcon 9 over at Slick 40, launching the USSF 124 mission. Lastly, coming back to support, before we continue on, I want to welcome actually a new channel member, Judy Wooten, joining us at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Judy. Glad to have you with us. And to Tim Scheidler for upgrading their membership to launch director status. Really appreciate that increased level of support, Tim. Thanks for being with us. Also, if you'd like to join in the conversation about this or other launches coming up and also help support the channel, feel free to use the YouTube Super Chat feature. If your comment or question is appropriate to be read on the show, we'd love to bring you into our live stream here. We're now T-minus 52 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Coming up at T-minus 38 minutes is the point at which the launch director gives their go for the start of propellant load, or makes that call rather. For those who have not been with us for a recent Falcon 9 launch, SpaceX is unfortunately not providing clean mission audio for its Falcon 9 launches, generally speaking. So as we hear the call-outs for this mission, we'll be sure to keep you in the loop and let you know what fueling milestones we're coming upon and what the callouts are from SpaceX. SpaceX is running its countdown from the Hangar X site here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. It's the facility where they refurbish Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights, as is the case with this booster. Launch vehicle you see on your screen, tail number 1078, preparing to launch for a 7th time. SpaceX, of course, also has support for this and all of its launches from its headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Again, the launch targeting that T0 liftoff time at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 22:30 UTC. This is the start of a 4-hour launch window, so once SpaceX begins the fueling process, they are committing to that liftoff time, and we will let you know once that fueling has begun. If for whatever reason SpaceX and the U.S. Space Force need to stand down from a launch attempt today, they do have another window of opportunity tomorrow at the exact same time. As we've seen, though, with some of these various camera angles, like here from our friend Chuck Briggs, or going out to this wide shot, you can see that weather is pretty idyllic here on Florida's Space Coast today. Coming into this launch attempt, the 45th Weather Squadron pegged odds of favorable weather for liftoff at greater than 95%, which is just about as good of a forecast as we see around here. The only concern that they are tracking is the possibility of a violation of the thick cloud layers rule. They're also keeping an eye on the upper level wind shear and solar activity, those latter two in the area of the low to moderate range. So not necessarily something that would stymie a launch attempt today, but of course all aspects of launch weather are something that the folks over at the 45th Weather Squadron keep a close eye on as we come into any launch attempt. We're T-minus 49 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. I want to thank Jeremy Ladd for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Jeremy. And also noting today is Valentine's Day. Jeremy says, Happy Valentine's Day. Hope you enjoyed the pics tagged you in on X from the last launch. Thank you for that. About to head up to the roof. I believe Jeremy's down in Cocoa Beach, if I remember correctly from last time. Going to set up for the double launch tonight. It says this date is a couple of Falcon 9s from the roof. Not a bad way to spend Valentine's Day. Pair of launches from the Space Coast. And of course, sandwiched in between those, we are tracking a West Coast Falcon 9 launch, a batch of Starlink satellites heading up from Vandenberg Space Force Base. So be sure to pop over to Launchpad Live for our live coverage of that mission. Then, of course, we'll be back with another dedicated stream here on YouTube for the IM-1 mission launch. We're now T-minus 48 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. Just about 10 minutes away from the point at which the launch director will make the call on the start of propellant load. So as we go ahead and get ready for that, let's talk about where this rocket's going to go once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Of course, the launch on tap for tonight, getting ready to lift off from SpaceX's workhorse pad, Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Once the rocket launches, it will fly in an easterly trajectory. As you can see from the red line, this is a return to landing site landing opportunity for this booster. No drone ship waiting for that one to return. It'll touch down at landing zone 2. You may be asking why landing zone 2, not landing zone 1. Well, reason being is that the Intuitive Machines mission, which was set to launch last night, that booster will actually return to land over at landing zone 1. So by the time you wake up tomorrow, if you're not with us for live launch coverage in the overnight hours, we'll have 2 Falcon boosters standing over at landing zones 1 and 2. I believe this will be the first time that those pads will house 2 returned boosters, not from a Falcon Heavy launch, standing together. Now, while a drone ship is not out in the Atlantic waiting for the first stage booster to return, do have one of the recovery vessels for the payload fairings staged out there. Doug is ready and waiting to scoop up the fairing halves from this mission. Bob is ready to support the IM-1 launch when that is ready to go. This is an image from SpaceX from a recent company talk where they describe the importance of payload fairing recoverings at a cost savings at about $6 million per recovery. You can see the fairing half in the image here, gently floating down to the ocean underneath parachutes. And of course, they're brought aboard recovery vessels like the one you see here in this picture. Recently, SpaceX's Vice President of Falcon Launch Vehicles, John Edwards, posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, stating that their flight leader of payload fairings, that is, had been on 15 previous flights and is getting ready to fly a 16th flight coming up next month. We're now T-minus 44 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. This is the point which we're about 6 or so minutes away from when the launch director will make a call on the start of fueling. Again, they do have a 4-hour launch window, so plenty of wiggle room if they're not ready to start the fueling process for whatever reason. But all indications suggest that they are, so we'll keep an eye out for updates on that. T minus 44 minutes and counting. I have a very generous $20 super chat from one of our channel members, Josh King. Really appreciate that, Josh. Josh asks, since this is a USSF mission, SpaceX will not show views of the second stage and payload like the X-37B mission. Correct. This is one of those circumstances where once the booster lands, that will be the end of the SpaceX broadcast, and barring some slip of a camera operator's finger, we likely will not see any upper stage views on this Falcon 9 flight today. So, astute observation, and you are correct. And the booster landing should happen right about 8 minutes after liftoff, so not too long of a wait to see all the big events of this particular flight that we will have visual access to. And of course, for those who are in and around the Central Florida area, be sure to keep your ears open and be aware that you may hear a sonic boom as that Falcon 9 first stage booster comes back to make a landing over at Landing Zone 2, LZ2, at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. We're now T minus 40 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. Did you hear from SpaceX a notification that we are less than 1 hour until the planned launch of this Falcon 9 rocket on the USSF 124 mission? They say all systems looking good, and as you can see in our live pictures, the weather is lovely for liftoff. So given the lovely weather outlook from SpaceX, we should be just about 2 minutes away from them making the call on the start of fueling. Of course, that fueling process begins just a few minutes after that. So before we go ahead and hit those milestones, let's go ahead and step through the countdown process, let you know what to expect for the fueling of the USSF 124 mission. Of course, as I mentioned, at T-minus 38 minutes, that's the point at which the launch director will make the call on the start of propellant load, which begins at T-minus 35 minutes when the fueling of the vehicle begins. Starts with RP1, or rocket-grade kerosene, being loaded onto both the first and the second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. Liquid oxygen gets loaded onto the first stage. T-minus 30 minutes. Cryogenic helium is loaded onto the first stage. Gets loaded onto the, well, I should say it helps pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. That same process begins on the second stage at about T-minus 26 minutes. T-minus 23 minutes, loading of the second stage kerosene tanks should be wrapped up. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, the strong back chill down process begins. We'll see the big vent from the strong back there, a good visual indication that fueling is well underway. And given the breeze that we're seeing out here at the press site, should be flowing out pretty perpendicular to the rocket. It's a pretty striking part of the fueling process coming up at T-minus 20 minutes, 50 seconds. T-minus 16 minutes, I should say. That's when the second stage liquid oxygen loading begins. It's followed at T-minus 7 minutes when the engine chill down sequence begins and involves filling a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, protecting those 9 Merlin 1D engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. At T-minus 6 minutes, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. At T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds, the strong back retract process begins. It'll start with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up. Then the strong back, or the transporter erector, will lean back about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9. It stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. T-minus 3 minutes, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be fully loaded. About 2 minutes out, the vehicle is fully fueled once second stage liquid oxygen loading wraps up. And it'll have 1 million pounds of propellant on board. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. 45 seconds out, the SpaceX launch director gives their go for liftoff. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. Then, of course, if all 9 Merlins ignite and are healthy, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the vehicle at T-minus 0 seconds. That point coming up again at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time this afternoon or early evening, however you want to think about that. 22:30 UTC for our friends joining around the world. Here's where SpaceX stands as far as its launches so far this year. It's got 12 in calendar year 2024. Slowly but surely climbing up to meet and hopefully surpass, per SpaceX's goals, its record 96 launches that it ended 2023 with. SpaceX looking to launch on average 12 times per month. And they're certainly doing a good bit to get toward that goal this week, as this is set to be the first of 3 launches within just several hours overnight. Coming up on T-minus 35 minutes here, the point at which fueling begins on the Falcon 9 rocket. So if you look near the base of the vehicle with me here, just above the tree line, as mentioned, this will be the rocket's 7th flight, so it's got a little bit of soot and character on it, but you can see just above, if you're looking at the crew access arm there, just above the tree line, you see sort of those horizontal rungs. So if you go up 1, 2, 3 rungs, and then go immediately to the left at the base where you can kind of still make out the X in SpaceX. About that point on the vehicle is where we'll start to see a frost ring form as liquid oxygen is loaded onto the LOX tank on the first stage. Apologies for the bounce. It is, as I mentioned, a little bit breezy out here on the Space Coast. But that'll be a good visual indication that fueling is in fact underway, as we do expect it has likely begun in the last minute or so. We'll also keep an eye out for word from SpaceX if they do decide to announce that in fact fueling has begun. We're now T minus 31 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. As I mentioned previously, we're starting to see that little bit of vapor form just near the X in SpaceX on this camera view here. We flip over to view from our friend Chuck Briggs. You can start to see some wisps of vapor as well near the base of the transporter erector. So with the start of fueling now visually appearing to be underway, SpaceX is committing themselves to that launch attempt going forward at 5:30 this afternoon. We're also just about 20 seconds or so away from the start of cryogenic helium being loaded onto the pressure vessels on the first stage. Now T minus 28 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. It's an indication of how busy a week it is for SpaceX right now. The company did share this look at all 4 of its pads around the country, which are all occupied by rockets this afternoon, all standing vertically. Going around the clock here, starting with what you see here on the upper right-hand corner. And of course is the mission that we're looking to see launch in the next 27 minutes and 52 seconds, the USSF 124 mission. Just beneath that is a fully stacked Starship rocket, ship on top of the Super Heavy booster down at Starbase in southern Texas, as SpaceX is preparing to go through some fully integrated vehicle tests in anticipation of its 3rd integrated flight test of the vehicle coming up at a yet to be determined date. Not heard that the Federal Aviation Administration has completed its evaluation of IFT-2. So, of course, that'll be, an important X factor, if you will, before SpaceX is able to set a launch date for this 3rd flight of its ever-important Starship rocket. Continuing around the clock, you see another Falcon 9 rocket, this one over at Vandenberg Space Force Base, getting ready to launch the Starlink mission that I mentioned, Starlink 7-14, a batch of 22 Starlink satellites on board that particular Falcon 9, launching for only the 2nd time. That 1st stage booster supporting this mission, that is tail number B1082. And then the top left, there's the Falcon 9 with Intuitive Machines' Nova C lander named Odyssey, getting ready to make its inaugural launch, potentially as early as tonight, or overnight, I should say, 1:05 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 06:05 UTC, for our friends around the world. It's a very busy time for SpaceX, of course, kicking things off with this particular launch. We're now T minus 24 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. I want to go over to great vantage point from our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions. And you can see there at the bottom of Pete's frame, you see that silver band around the Falcon 9 2nd stage. It's an indication that there will be a long coast phase for the 2nd stage once it separates from the Falcon 9 1st stage booster. Now, SpaceX has not disclosed the amount of time or the number of burns that the Falcon 9 2nd stage may be called upon to perform. That band would suggest that it would be going on a long coast phase, and that band helps protect 2nd stage and keeps the propellant at the correct temperatures. We do know that the 6 satellites on board are going to a near equatorial orbit but the Space Force and Space Systems Command have not said a lot beyond that as far as where exactly they'll be going to orbit, what inclination and all that. This is a joint mission between the Missile Defense Agency and the Space Development Agency. If you'd like some light reading as we get ready to see the launch of this mission, we do have an article up on our website, spaceflightnow.com, with lots more detail about the satellites on board. But just as a bit of an overview here, two of the satellites represent the MDA's Hypersonic and Ballistic Tracking Space Sensor Program, HBTSS, and four of them from the SDA side of the equation are part of what it calls its Tranche 0 tracking layer. It's part of what it describes as its Proliferated Warfighter Space Architecture, or PWSA. Again, both of these are part of the overall National Security Space Launch Program, NSSL. This is SpaceX's second launch as part of the Phase 2 task orders. Now, when I say Tranche 0, you might be wondering to yourself, what exactly does that mean? Well, before they go through the process of getting their full suite of permanent satellite constellation on board, SDA has ordered and is going through a series of tests with what it calls Tranche 0, basically demo satellites that'll be used to prove out some of the technology that will be on board the more robust full constellation of satellites in the tranches that are numbered beyond that, Tranche 1, 2, and so on and so forth. Now, T-minus 20 minutes, 56 seconds and counting. About 20 seconds or so away from the start of the big vent. Good fueling milestone and visual indication that fueling is continuing on track today. T-minus 20 minutes, 20 seconds. You see the start of the big vent there on your screen. Fueling moving along as expected. We appreciate our friend Chuck Briggs for bringing us this angle on the Falcon 9 rocket. We're at T minus 16 minutes on the dot. Now hit the starting point of liquid oxygen loading on the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. Things continuing to press on well. I'll go ahead and take a look at the live chat here, see what's going on with everybody. Thanks some folks for their support. I'll thank one of our regular channel members with us, Callistia Lee, for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Callistia. And if you're one of those who just received channel membership, first off, welcome aboard. Secondly, I hope you enjoy the perks of channel membership. And if you haven't thanked Callistia already in the live chat, be sure to do so. Channel member Jimbo Indy's been a member for 1 month. Thanks for being with us, Jimbo. It says, so cool. Our chat members are so generous. And yes, they are. Speaking of that generosity, Richard Cochran with a very generous 20-pound super chat. I think making a reference to something preceding in the live chat, asking about something to do with the Evil Knievel. Not entirely sure what that was, but I'm sure lively bit of chatter there. Thanks again for the support, Richard. Thanks also to channel member Nelson Reyes for a $10 super chat. Good to see you this afternoon, Nelson. Says, go Spaceflight Now, go Space Force, go Falcon 9. And finally to SG for a $3 super chat. Thank you so much. And if you haven't already, there's another great way to help support what we do here. It's quick and easy, just by hitting the like button on this stream. Allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing. It helps more folks find this live coverage as we are now just a little over 14 minutes away from liftoff. Now T minus 13 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. The next fueling milestone, of course, will be the thermal conditioning of the 9 Merlin 1D engines. Happens at T minus 7 minutes. For those who have been tracking this mission from a previous Falcon flight back last summer on the Transporter 9 mission, we saw Varda Space launch its W1 mission. That has been working on orbit and was hoping to get some good news about being able to bring its satellite back. Well, just about 5 or so minutes ago, they did post this update saying, and you can see there the quote on your screen, we're excited to announce the FAA has approved re-entry attempt for February 21st. This is the first time in our nation's history that the FAA has granted a Part 450 re-entry license, licensed a commercial entity to land a spacecraft on U.S. soil. This has been a milestone that Varda has been working towards for some time, so congratulations to that team for getting the clearance to bring their spacecraft back. And we'll look forward to keeping an eye on and tracking that re-entry when it comes up next week. As we continue to step through things, let's go ahead and take a look at the launch timeline on this particular mission. It'll start, of course, with the T0 liftoff at 5:30 p.m. It's followed at T plus 1 minute 12 seconds with max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. T plus 2 minutes 16 seconds. That'll be first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO. It's followed 3 seconds later by stage separation. And then second stage end ignition, that Merlin vacuum engine will ignite at T plus 2 minutes and 27 seconds. Now, as this is a RTLS, or return to landing site mission, the boost back burn that lasts 54 seconds will start at T plus 2 minutes and 32 seconds. The payload fairings are deployed from on top of the second stage at T plus 3 minutes and 8 seconds. The first stage entry burn starts at T plus 6 minutes and 16 seconds. That burn lasts for just 18 seconds. The first stage landing burn will begin at T plus 7 minutes 32 seconds. And then finally, the first stage landing will occur at T plus 8 minutes and 1 second over at landing zone 2. We're now T minus 9 minutes, 40 seconds to go before the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. So let's go ahead and talk about the vehicle here. The majority of the Falcon 9 rocket, about 2/3, are made up by the Falcon 9 first stage. As mentioned, this particular first stage has flown 6 times, going for its 7th time tonight. This particular one is designated B-1078 in the SpaceX fleet. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are the black carbon fiber landing legs used to land the first stage, at times on a drone ship, but today it'll be over at landing zone 2. Above the first stage is the inner stage. It's a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. You see in the image on the right-hand side of your screen those deployable hypersonic grid fins. These titanium winglets provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it falls through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart towards, this time, landing zone 2. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches. 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust, and because this is a national security space launch mission, we don't know exactly how many times it will be fired on today's mission, but as mentioned, that silver band around the second stage suggests a long coast phase, which would require some additional protection for the propellant on board. Finally, above this second stage are the payload fairings. Payload fairings made of a carbon composite material that is 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, and 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. The two halves of the payload fairings will be recovered a little bit further downrange of stage separation. The recovery vessel Doug is on tap to scoop these out of the Atlantic Ocean and bring them back to Port Canaveral, where SpaceX will examine them, refurbish them, and turn them around for future use. We're now T minus 6 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. About 30 seconds into the engine chill down sequence this evening. As we're coming up on the last 6 minutes of the count, if you haven't already, if you would be so kind as to hit the like button if you haven't done so, to help more folks find this live coverage and see what is potentially the first of 3 launches that we're tracking from SpaceX this evening. We're now T-minus 5 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. I have just a little bit of time left, so let's briefly step through the booster history of this particular first stage booster, tail number 1078. Its first launch was a crewed mission over at Historic Launch Complex 39A, the launch of the Crew 6 Quartet on March 2nd, 2023. That was followed up by the launch of the satellites for SES. Those are the O3B mPOWER 3 and 4 satellites on April 28th, 2023. This was followed by a series of Starlink missions, Starlink 6-4 on June 4th, Starlink 6-8 on August 7th, Starlink 6-16 on September 16th, and most recently, Starlink 6-31 on December 3rd. We're now T-minus 4 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. We're hearing the call out for a strong back retract as the clamp arms will first open up underneath the payload fairings that we're seeing here in Chuck Briggs' view. The transport erector will then lean away from the Falcon 9 rocket, about 1.5 degrees away. Taking a look at this view from SpaceX, you can see the insignia of the mission patch for today's flight, USSF 124, just above the symbol of the U.S. Space Force. Just a bit of a note for some housekeeping. You see our countdown clock at the top right-hand corner of your screen, T-minus 3 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. A little bit ahead of the time you see there on SpaceX's clock. The reason for that is our clock is in real time. The SpaceX time that just went away is a little bit behind. Just a bit of a lag with the SpaceX stream coming out over on X. And again, just as a reminder for those who may have joined us recently, because this is a national security space launch mission, we will not be getting views from the second stage and seeing the 6 satellites on board. So following stage separation, SpaceX will be following the first stage booster, making its way back down toward landing zone 2 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, and we will again not be seeing views of the second stage and the payloads on board. Did just hear call out that the stage 1 liquid oxygen tank has finished loading. Coming up, the final point of fueling is stage 2 LOX load. At that point, the Falcon 9 will be fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant. Just a little over 2 minutes to the planned liftoff. Getting some great views from our friend Pete Carstens and our wide camera here at the press site. Now 2 minutes to launch. And we did hear a call out for stage 2 LOX load complete. The vehicle is now fully fueled and preparing for launch. About 1:38 to go. The venting that you're seeing are the ground gas closeouts as they clear the feed lines, getting ready to launch in just about a minute. Standing by for the call from the SpaceX launch director that they are go for launch. Should be coming up in just a few seconds. Now 30 seconds. And we did hear the mission director make the call for go for launch. We are getting ready for that launch, now less than 20 seconds away. 15 seconds. And 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the USSF 124 mission, launching satellites to test hypersonic tracking technology. Satellites for the Missile Defense Agency and the Space Development Agency now soaring above Florida Space Coast, 30 seconds into flight. Let's listen to the roar of those 9 Merlin engines. Coming up on 1 minute into flight. So far, nominal mission. Coming up on max Q in about 4 seconds. Point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Some great views from our friend Pete Carstens at Max Q Productions. There's our tracking camera from Adam. And our friend Chuck Briggs getting another angle on the Falcon flight. Or the call out for MVAC engine chill. They are thermally conditioning the second stage Merlin vacuum engine. Coming up on a number of events in rapid succession. First will be main engine cutoff at T plus 2 minutes and 16 seconds. Following by stage separation 3 seconds later. And then second stage engine start, SES-1 at T plus 2 minutes 27 seconds. Then the boost back burn, 2 minutes 32 seconds. Coming up on MECO. Here you see main engine cutoff. See stage separation there. And MVAC ignition. Looking for the start of that boost back burn. Here we see that. Getting some great views from Pete Carstens here. And this from Chuck Briggs. Coming up on 3 minutes in flight when we'll see the fairing deployment. And you can see here those payload fairings falling away from the Falcon 9 second stage, glinting against the setting sun here in Florida. This is about as much as we're going to see from the Falcon 9 second stage at this point, because this is a national security mission on board, so we won't actually see the satellites themselves on board the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket, but you can see those payload fairings here in our view from Chuck Briggs as they continue to fall away from the Falcon 9 rocket second stage. Coming up on 4 minutes into flight, just over 2 minutes, the first stage entry burn is set to begin. Those bursts that you see there on your screen are the cold gas thrusters. It's what helps the Falcon 9 first stage boosters' attitude adjust as it prepares for that first stage entry burn. This is an onboard view from the SpaceX first stage. And back to our tracking team. This camera is Pete Carstens. That booster is making its way back down towards landing zone 2 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That landing coming up in just about 3 minutes. The entry burn is set to begin in just over a minute from now. T plus 6 minutes, 16 seconds. T plus 5 minutes, 50 or 48 seconds and counting. Still seeing those occasional bursts from the cold gas thrusters as the vehicle continues to orient itself back down for a landing at landing zone 2. That entry burn set to begin in just about 10 seconds. And there you see the start of the entry burn. Saw the green flash of the T-tab, that igniter. And that entry burn beginning with a great perspective here from Pete Carstens. And you see why there's so much soot on these Falcon 9 first stage boosters as the vehicle makes its way down towards the plume through it. Now T plus 6 minutes, 50 seconds into flight. The entry burn has wrapped up, coming up on the landing burn in just a little over 30 seconds. That first stage landing burn now less than 10 seconds away from starting. These great views from Pete Carstens. And the landing burn has begun. Falcon 9 hitting the brakes as it makes its way down towards landing zone 2. You see they're just on the horizon, those birds scattering. You can just see the Falcon 9 making its way just above the tree line there. There's a crowd on hand to watch it. You see the landing on a slight delay from the SpaceX stream here. And a good visual confirmation of the touchdown of the Falcon 9 rocket at landing zone 2. This was the 272nd landing of a Falcon 9 first stage booster and the 10th landing over at landing zone 2. Again, because this is a national security mission, we're not going to be seeing views of the upper stage. So this will be, for now, a successful wrap-up of this phase of the mission. And we'll look for confirmation from SDA and MDA that their satellites were successfully deployed. We don't know exactly how long that may take, as those agencies have not stated the length of time for the second stage burn this afternoon / early evening. But a spectacular launch, a successful landing of that first stage booster. Want to check into the live chats. Thank a few more folks for their support before we go ahead and hit some of our final markers of the evening. But first, want to take this view from SpaceX as we see some live views from Vandenberg Space Force Base and from here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center of the two Falcon 9s that are both waiting for their turn to launch. I want to thank channel member Janine for a $2 super chat saying hello, Will and everyone. Thank you so much, Janine. Space Nerd with a $2 super chat as well saying go Falcon. Apologies for likely mispronouncing this next one here. I'll do my best. Jevgenji's Nozenko for a €250 super chat. Thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate that. $5 super chat from SG. Good to see you this afternoon, SG. And very generous $20 from Callistia Lee. Thank you so much, Callistia, who says, thank you as always for the spectacular commentary, Will. You, the mods, and all of Spaceflight Now are the best. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you. And I will echo that and say much love to the moderators for all they do helping us out. As I see, Stephanie B has been hard at work in the live chat, as well as Astro Jen, who I believe is a new moderator. Welcome aboard, Astro Jen. And as we do have a successful liftoff and a successful landing, let's go ahead and take a look at the mission stats as they now stand as per tradition here. This was the 7th flight of Falcon 9 first stage booster, tail number 1078. This was SpaceX's 298th Falcon 9 launch to date, its 13th Falcon 9 launch of 2024. This was the 243rd Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 13th orbital launch of the year, the 99th orbital launch in the last 365 days. This was the 167th SpaceX orbital launch from Pad 40, and the 222nd overall launch from this particular pad. This is now the 13th launch for SpaceX on the year, as mentioned. Moving on to recoveries. This was the 10th landing over at Landing Zone 2, LZ2. The 46th SpaceX land landing in the state of Florida. So the 61st overall SpaceX land landing when you bring California into the mix. And as stated when the booster touched down, this was the 272nd overall SpaceX booster landing to date. Finally, moving now to a global picture. This was the 9th overall orbital launch from Florida, the 14th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 15th orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company, including Rocket Lab's flight from New Zealand. And this was the 28th orbital launch globally this year. How does that break down by country? Well, this is the pie slices as they stand right now. U.S. continues to lead in the orbital launch market. SpaceX driving that blue section of the pie with 15 launches in total for the U.S. China in the number 2 spot at 8 launches, or 29% of the market, thereabouts. And covering it up slightly, but Russia is behind the picture of the transporter erector and the pad there. It has 1 launch on the year, Japan and India, 1 each as well, Iran with 2. Of course, as previously mentioned, this is still a very busy day for SpaceX, as they're looking forward to the hopeful launch of Intuitive Machines' Nova C lander in the very early morning hours on Thursday morning for a liftoff at 1:05 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 06:05 UTC. They also have the planned launch of a batch of Starlink satellites from Vandenberg Space Force Base. Showed you those live pictures for just a moment before SpaceX took down that feed. But that launch is getting ready to lift off, targeting 4:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 p.m. Eastern from Vandenberg Space Force Base. So for that mission, be sure to keep an eye out. We're going to be doing our live coverage from Launchpad Live. So that's where you'll find our live coverage of the Starlink 7-14 mission. We'll be back with a dedicated stream, though, covering the IM-1 launch. So if you haven't gotten your fill this Valentine's Day of your love of orbital rockets, don't you worry. Space Flight Now has got you covered for the next several hours. So with the successful launch of this particular mission, we're going to go ahead and thank our team and stop down for a little bit, prepare to support our live coverage from the West Coast in just a little bit. Want to start by once again thanking our wonderful moderators in the live chat, Astro Jen, Stephanie B, for doing all that you do, helping keep things moving and allow folks to enjoy having a comfortable and safe space to talk and ask questions and enjoy a little bit of a slice of space life away from everything else going around in the world these days. Want to thank our friends Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck Briggs for helping to support the launch coverage tonight. Excellent job, gentlemen. And rest assured, they will both be back for the hopeful launch of Intuitive Machines Nova Sea Lander in the early morning hours of Thursday. So look forward to seeing your coverage then with us. And of course, to our photography team here on the Space Coast, Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane. Again, here are their handles on X to see some of their launch photography from this and the Intuitive Machines launch when it goes ahead and lifts off, hopefully Thursday morning. But they do have one more opportunity to launch on Friday if necessary. If that doesn't pan out, then we're looking at somewhere between March 14th, 15th, or 16th if SpaceX and Intuitive Machines need to stand down for that launch attempt. If that is the case, then SpaceX will be targeting their next launch from this pad, Launch Complex 39A. That'll be the launch of the Crew 8 astronauts and cosmonaut. That is currently targeting February 28th as it stands right now. We are, of course, waiting any potential adjustments to that schedule given the, as it stands now, one-day slip of the Intuitive Machines launch. So the 28th is the placeholder day right now, TBD, to see if there will be some adjustments to that. And one last time for the folks in the back, we will have live coverage of the Starlink 7-14 mission launch. Again, that will be on our 24-hour live stream channel, Launchpad Live, here on YouTube. If you'd like to join us for that, here's our slate with the times. If you'd like to screenshot this, set a reminder in your phone to come back and join us. We'll be starting our coverage 30 minutes ahead of the teaser liftoff time you see there at the bottom of your screen. So depending on where you are in the world, it will be about 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock, or quadruple zero UTC when we begin our live coverage over on Launchpad Live of the Starlink 7-14 mission. Those that are here, you should be redirected once we end this live stream. So if you'd like to just go ahead and make it easy on yourselves and just leave things as it is, keep this window open, go ahead and enjoy dinner or lunch, depending on where you are in the world, maybe breakfast. And we'll see you back here in just a little bit. Last but not least, want to thank our editor running the technical aspects of the broadcast here, Stephen Young, editor of Space Flight Now. And for all of us here at the Space Flight Now team, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be sure to be good to yourself, be good to others. For all who celebrate, have a wonderful Valentine's Day. And we will see you very shortly over on Launchpad Live. Until then, bye-bye.